March 18th, 1968. 10:11 at night, deep in the Haddish jungle in the northwestern part of Phuoc Tuy Province. A single headlight cuts through the dark. A tractor dragging a trailer packed with supplies grinds along a wide jungle track that American forces had bulldozed through the bush several months before. 100 meters up the trail, 5 Australian soldiers are lying absolutely motionless inside a bomb crater. Their hands rest on one firing wire buried just under the surface of the track. 4 beehive charges and 4 claymore mines are all connected to a pressure plate. The driver thinks this stretch of road is completely clear. The Australians had withdrawn from this whole area weeks back. That belief is about to get him killed. But to understand how 5 guys managed to flip the script on the hunters, we need to start from the very beginning. February 1968. While all of America's focus was locked on the Tet Offensive, 2 squadron of Australia's Special Air Service Regiment slipped quietly into Nui Dat. They weren't there to hold territory. They weren't there to win over local populations. They were there to kill. These weren't your standard infantry soldiers. The SAS selection course was absolutely brutal. Roughly 20% of candidates made it through. The ones who survived became what the Viet Cong would eventually call Emma Rung, phantoms of the jungle. Their commanding officer, Major Brian Wade, had trained in demolition ambush methods at Fort Bragg. He had come to Vietnam carrying direct orders from Brigadier Ron Hughes to stop gathering intelligence and start killing. Hughes did not want recon reports coming across his desk. He wanted the 274th Viet Cong Regiment to feel that Phuoc Tuy Province had become dangerous ground. The numbers were almost absurd. 5 to 6 soldiers per patrol went up against enemy units that moved in companies of 100 or more. But the SAS had an advantage the Viet Cong never anticipated. They figured out how to use the jungle as their weapon. March 17th, 1968. A Royal Australian Air Force No. 9 Squadron helicopter lifts off from Nui Dat, carrying 6 men. Leading the patrol was Sergeant Frank Cashmore, 25 years old, originally from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. It was his first time commanding a patrol. His second in command was Corporal Danny Wright, 28, who was qualified in Vietnamese. The lead demolitions man was Corporal Dave Scheel, 28, a former Dutch commando. Handling demolition support was Private Kim Malaya, 19 years old, on his very first operational deployment. Covering the west flank was Private Adrian Blacker, 21, who carried a suppressed Sterling submachine gun. Watching the east flank was Private David Elliott, 22, the demolition man who would end up hauling the biggest load of his life on that mission. Their objective was the Firestone Trail, a wide track sitting roughly 200 meters west of landing zone Dampier, cleared by American Rome plows, cutting through the Haddish jungle. A recon flight had picked up something odd, fresh tractor tracks running across the trail. No Allied vehicle had any clearance to operate there. Intelligence put the Viet Cong escort at as many as 60 fighters. Every man was loaded down with 14 water bottles, 7 days of rations, weapons, demolition equipment, and a URC-10 radio. The wait was absolutely punishing. The helicopter flared and touched down, and the men jumped out. Elliot hit the ground instantly. The sheer mass of his demolition pack drove him straight into the dirt, and his leg buckled. Within a few minutes, the helicopter had to come back and pull him out. They were now a team of 5. The ambush would have to work with what remained. Cashmore had spent 3 full days rehearsing this back at Nui Dat. Major Wade had personally driven a Land Rover over the test rig to dial in the pressure plate. It needed to be sensitive enough to trigger under a tractor tire, but stable enough that it would not go off from wind or an animal walking across it. The beehive charge was built to punch clean through armor. 4 of them were packed beneath the surface of the trail, wired together in parallel. 4 claymore mines were set at angles to cover anyone moving around the flanks of the vehicle. Each claymore held 700 steel ball bearings. One single wire ran 100 meters back to their firing position inside a bomb crater. A steel pressure plate was dialed to close the circuit only when a vehicle rolled over it. Night came down. The jungle filled up with noise, insects, animals, all of it. The patrol did not move a muscle. At 1:45 in the morning, Cashmore picked it up, the low growl of an engine somewhere in the dark. A single headlight pushed in from the east. The tractor rolled right over the pressure plate. Nothing happened. The circuit did not fire. Either the vehicle was too light or the plate had not set correctly in the ground. The Viet Cong supply run rolled on without a scratch. When the sun came up, the patrol crept forward onto the trail. They reset every charge, recalibrated the plate, then slipped back into their position and waited. The second night, 11:10 p.m. That single headlight showed up again. Same tractor, same track, this time rolling in from the west. The Viet Cong driver had absolutely no idea he was passing over a firing plate. No idea that 5 Australians were watching him from the darkness. No idea that this section of trail had been converted into a kill zone. The front tire of the tractor rolled onto the plate. It was the most horrific explosion I have ever witnessed in my military career. It blew me arse over head backwards. 4 giant orange flames went up into the sky, plus 4 claymores. It was just unbelievable. All 4 beehive charges went off at the same moment. The shaped charges ripped the tractor apart into flying metal. The claymores tore through everything within a 50-meter radius. 4 Vietnamese voices. Wright, the patrol's language specialist, could make out at least one of them calling out for help. The patrol pulled back 20 meters into the tree line, weapons up and ready. As daylight broke, one lone surviving Viet Cong, wrapped in bandages and covered in blood, stumbled out across landing zone Dampier. The patrol held their position and stayed out of sight. No engagement. At 9:10 in the morning, the Iroquois came back in. 5 men got on board. Not one combat casualty among them. Air reconnaissance went in afterward and photographed the site. The crater was enormous. The tractor and the trailer had been completely wiped out. Official tally, 15 Viet Cong killed. But a Viet Cong defector who later crossed over to the Allied side put the actual figure at 21. Frank Cashmore would carry the nickname Frank the Tractor Job Cashmore throughout the rest of his time in the regiment. He came back for a second tour in 1971. But the real weight of what happened that night had nothing to do with the body count. It was the signal it sent. The tractor job became the foundational case study for what Major Wade called the reconnaissance ambush doctrine. From April 1968 onward, 2 squadrons stopped functioning as an intelligence unit. They became a hunter-killer force. Over 6 years of operations across Vietnam, the Australian SAS ran roughly 1,200 patrols. They recorded 492 confirmed Viet Cong kills, against just 2 combat deaths on their own side. The Viet Cong named them Ma Rong, phantoms of the jungle, because 5-man patrols had learned to consistently flip the situation on whoever was hunting them. The tractor job showed exactly what Brigadier Hughes had always believed, that the SAS was not built to watch and report back. They were built to make the enemy scared to move once the sun went down. And out on that trail in March 1968, they proved it completely. The Australian SAS stayed in Vietnam right up until 1971. By that point, the wider strategic picture had changed, but the tactical lessons that came out of patrols like Cashmore's were picked up and studied at Fort Bragg at Hereford, and at special operations training programs all over the world. 5 men, 4 beehive charges, 4 claymores, 1 wire, and 1 deadly assumption by the enemy that the trail was safe.